Part 1. The Road Home. Chapter 1. The Boy Who Fell from the Sky. Alright, let's make this nice and simple, the thug said, his golden tooth glinting off the nearby streetlight as he pushed a well-dressed man up against the alley wall and held a knife to his throat. Behind him was another thug, this one unarmed, but with muscles 3 times as big, cracking his knuckles. Please, the businessman said, I don't got any money on me. Oh, is that so? I'm sure you won't mind if my buddy here checks your pockets then, eh? He might not, but I do, yelled a confident voice from the entrance to the alleyway. There, standing at the opening was an 18-year-old man in a tuxedo and top hat, with a cape draped around his shoulders. One of his gloved hands he held towards the thugs, the other underneath his cape. He had a clever grin on his face and a sharp look in his hazel eyes, and hanging off his neck was a teardrop-shaped pink necklace encased within a silver flower. The unarmed thug scoffed. Huh, what do you think you're doing, huh? Trying to play hero? Guess I am, in fact. Right here in an alleyway next to the corner of... He glanced behind him at a street sign. Allison Way and Grimm Street. And I demand you stop bugging that part. He made a small squeal as the thug moved closer and slapped his hand out of the way. Slowly, the thug leaned in close. Yeah? What you gonna do to stop me? Actually, I was kind of hoping we could just talk it out. We could just talk it out, he says. The thug mocked as he turned back towards his cohort. Fat chance. He threw a punch, hitting the caped man in the face, knocking him to the ground. As he hit the sidewalk, his free hand fell out from underneath his cape, revealing a phone that clattered to the ground. The thug's eyes went wide when he already saw it dialed to 111. Aw, damn it, he yelled. Percy, he's called the cops. We've gotta freeze. Hands where I can see them, the policeman said, turning the corner, followed by a couple more behind him. The thugs hesitated, turning to each other with a pair of angry-looking glares on their faces, but ultimately they complied, dropping their weapons and putting their hands in the air. The officers moved in, handcuffing the 2 of them and dragging them towards the police cars. The man who was just being mugged let out a sigh of relief and walked over to the caped one, offering him a hand back to his feet. Thank you, he said. Don't mention it, the caped man said, grabbing his hat off the ground and taking the other man's hand. Aifos, one of the cops said, walking up to the 2. You can't keep doing this. Aifos, the businessman said. That's a weird name. I know, Aifos said, putting his top hat back on. And don't worry, officer, I'll be fine. Look, I get you're trying to help, but one of these days you're going to get yourself seriously hurt, the officer said. One of those men had a knife. If he had approached you instead of the other, you could have been killed. Does this guy do this a lot? The businessman asked. Yes, he's been doing it for 2 years now. And look, we appreciate it, but officer, I said don't worry, Aifos said. My necklace here is magic, and it'll keep me safe from harm. Magic? Fairy tales aren't going to protect you. If something serious happens... The officer sighed. Look, I just don't want to see you wind up dead on the street one day. You seem like a good kid. I think my magic's a little bit more than a fairy tale. He tipped his hat. Well, I've got to go. Officer? With that, he turned and walked away as the officer let out a heavy sigh behind him. Once Aifos was a good bit away, he let out a sigh himself as he slipped his hands into his pockets. He'd been doing this for years, not just here in New Eris, but all over the country. He was a hero, and yet, despite his exploits, he never saw her again. The woman who'd saved his life, Sophia. He came upon a small stone plaza, dotted with umbrella-covered tables and benches looking out towards the park, with a lake in the center. There he stopped and placed one of his hands on the back of a bench as he stared out towards the lake. She'd be proud of me, though, wouldn't she? He thought as he reached up and wrapped his hands around his necklace. It let out a small pink glow, though he didn't notice as he drifted away in the thought. Back again, huh? A woman's voice chimed in along with a broom sweep, suddenly pulling him out of his head. Aifos looked back over his shoulder to see a familiar face. He didn't know her that well, but this little plaza sat right in front of a local restaurant, and she worked there as a cashier. With a smile on her face, she leaned her broom against the table and placed a hand on her hip. She always seemed to have a chipper tone in his voice, and for some reason always seemed happy to see him, even though they didn't talk much. He had half convinced himself it was all just part of the customer service act, but Regardless, he appreciated it. Helped him feel welcome here, even though he didn't have a home. Yup, Aifos said, just like always. Your lucky boss lets you sleep there, you know. Technically, this is private property. Yeah, trust me, I know how lucky I am. Yeah, you'd better. She scooped up a closed foam tray off the table and walked it to the bench next to him. Boss told me to give you that if I saw you out here. Aifos sat down and opened it up. It was a plate of rice with some cooked veggies and a plastic fork to go along with them. He smiled. I really gotta find a way to repay him for helping me out so much. Well, if you ever get tired of your hero work, I'm sure you wouldn't mind an extra pair of hands on deck, the woman said as she got back to sweeping. Aifos let out a small laugh. I'll consider it. That's just a polite way of saying, shove off, Jane. I'm not working in some smelly old ramen shop, isn't it? What? No, I really mean... She let out a laugh. Well, don't go getting yourself killed, Mr. Hero. See you tomorrow. He walked back into the shop. Aifos smiled as he ate the food and turned towards the sun setting over the park. He was sure they were just leftovers, but he wasn't sure how he'd survived if Boss wasn't kind enough to give him a tray of this stuff every day. There always seemed to be someone willing to look out for him no matter where he went, and it always warmed his heart. He just wished he knew some way to pay him back. That had been the story of his life ever since he was little. He would have been dead as a child if it wasn't for the kindness of a total stranger, and that stranger chose him to be the next inheritor of this amulet. He wanted to take that kindness and give it forwards tenfold. So that's what he dedicated his life to, helping others wherever he could. Once he finished his food, he put his tray back on the ground and laid down on the bench using his cape as a blanket. He had no home, no job, no family, nothing. In truth, he didn't even remember his own name. Yet he was determined to make something of himself, to be a hero, just like her. The next thing he knew, he was rubbing his eyes awake as the sunlight filled the sky. He stretched and picked up his hat and his tray, throwing the latter away while putting the former on his head. With another stretch, he pulled himself up from the bench and made his way out to the nearby shop. He didn't go inside, but he used the window as a mirror, using the reflection to straighten his hat and his suit. Once he was all ready, he tightened his gloves and was about to walk away when he heard a voice call out to him. "Shouldn't be staring at my window like that," an old man said, walking up to the store. He shuffled through his brown coat, searching for his keys as he walked past Aifos. "Oh, boss," Aifos said. "People are going to think you're peeking in at them or something," Boss said, unlocking the restaurant door. "The shop's closed right now, isn't it?" "Still, someone sees you from across the plaza, staring into my shop. Could leave a bad reputation at best, or you're going to get the cops call on you at worst. Either way, a lot of unnecessary hassle when you could go find a public restroom." Right. Sorry. I know how it is," he said, pushing open the door. "Hey, wait, boss," Aifos said, taking a step towards him. "I wanted to say thanks for everything you do to help me out." "Don't mention it. I've been there before. Though if you ask me, you should spend less money on fancy clothes and work on getting an apartment or something. I won't be around forever, you know." "I didn't buy these. They're magic." "Magic, Boss asked skeptically. "Well, I don't know about you, but last time I checked, magic doesn't exist. I know it sounds hard to believe, but check this out," Aifos said, reaching up and taking off his necklace. Suddenly, the fancy suit disappeared, the top hat, the gloves, the coat, all gone, replaced with little more than rags, and even his hair went from a well-kept ponytail to a dirty mess. Boss stood there, dumbstruck for a moment. Well, I'll be. Maybe the old fool wasn't so much of a fool after all. The old fool?" Aifos asked, putting the necklace back on. The second the clip was closed, his old outfit reappeared, though this time without the cape. The boss quickly glanced around the plaza. "Come inside," he said in a hushed tone, holding the door open. "Oh, okay," Aifos said, caught off guard by his sudden invitation. It was an old place. Gray-tiled floors, plain wooden tables and chairs. There was a counter, red on the sides, white on the top, resting on the far side, and a window leading to the kitchen, and the whole place smelt of ramen. Once inside, Boss motioned for Aifos to follow him and led him back to the kitchen and into a small office in the back of the building. There wasn't much there besides a rather plain, basic little desk with a computer, some papers, and a small photo. Boss sat down at the chair at the front of the desk and picked up the photo. "This is a picture of me and my father," he said, handing over a picture of a man with a child on his shoulders. The sight made Aifos smile as he looked back up at the old man in front of him. "You were such a cute kid," Aifos said. Boss let out a deep breath. "Listen, Aifos. My father once told me a story of some sort of magical world full of monsters and winged knights. My mother and we always assumed he was either a bit of a dreamer or was perhaps on drugs. All of these stories of magic he told, they seemed impossible. Yet, he spent much of his life determined to find the portal into that magical world so he could show us. My mother and I used to joke that he was chasing fairy tales, but unless you've got some trick up your sleeve, from what it sounds like you believe in magic too, don't you?" "Well, I don't see how I could not." He held up his hand and one of his gloves disappeared and then reappeared. "I don't think normal clothes do that. My father was murdered one day. Found dead in a park. He still had all his cash and his belongings, so whoever killed him wasn't after his money, and it's not like he was a very powerful man. And if you aren't killing someone for power or for money, then you're probably killing them to keep them quiet." Aifos opened his mouth to speak, but he wasn't entirely sure what to say. He glanced down at the photo with a sad look on its face. After a few moments, he settled with a simple, "I'm sorry." Boss didn't seem particularly saddened by his own story or grateful for Aifos' sentiment. Given his age, it was likely that he'd long since accepted it. With a heavy sigh, he took the photo back and straightened it on his desk. "What I'm trying to say is be careful who you go around telling about your magic tricks. My father believed in magic, and if it actually is real, and you aren't pulling some sort of trick, I wouldn't be surprised if that's what caused his death. I'd hate to see the same thing happen to you." I see. Thank you for the warning, Boss." "Well, I have to open up shop," Boss said, standing up from his chair. "You'd better get moving on with your day too, whatever it is you do out there. I'll be seeing you later, Aifos." Aifos stood up and gave Boss a quick bow. "See you later." As Aifos made his way out of the building, Boss's words rolled over in his head. Someone didn't want normal people to know about magic, and if that was true, he could be in bigger danger than he thought. Sure, his necklace was protecting him, but to anyone actually well versed in fighting magic, surely they'd have some way to counteract its powers. As his thoughts marched forward, though, one particular thought crossed his mind. There was only one person he'd ever met who also had magic. Sophia. She must have known about these magic hunters too. A knot grew in his stomach as he came to the realization that she might not have only just known about them, but that she could have been one. It wasn't the first time he thought about who she actually was, of course. Thoughts like this crossed his mind at least once a week, and every time he came to the same conclusion. He simply didn't know enough to actually come to one. All he had was her name and her necklace. Everything else was just up to him to assume. He liked to tell himself that she saved him for the sake of saving him, that she was a hero, just like he was trying to be, but in reality, she could have had any number of motives for it. With so many years to think on it, he had his fair share of ludicrous ideas, ranging from some sort of sacrificial, magical ritual to just wanting to make friends with that wolf. Magic Hunter was a new one, though, and this one made him the most uncomfortable. She was a hero, wasn't she? He was trying so hard to be like her, so if she wasn't, then... He stopped dead in his tracks as an unbelievable sight met his eyes. There she was, standing just down the road. Something looked off about her, but there was no mistaking it. "Sophia?" Aifos asked under his breath. He took a few steps towards her, and she only passed him a brief glance before taking off in the other direction. Wait! Sophia!" he yelled, running after her, pushing through the crowds that she seemed to have a much easier time weaving through. Eventually, they came to a crosswalk, and the light flicked to green just as Sophia got close. The street became a river of cars, but she didn't stop. As soon as she got close, she jumped onto the first car and then leapt off its hood. A jewel-studded whip appeared in her hand, and she used it to latch onto the streetlight, swinging across to the other side. Aifos stopped as he reached the cars. Somehow, nobody else seems to have noticed. He clenched his fist tight as the stream of traffic blocked his path. Sophia slowly faded out of sight on the other side. As soon as the light flicked back to red, he took off in a sprint, trying to move as fast as he could to catch up to her. Just a little down the ways, he saw her turn down an alley and quickly turned down it after her. "Sophia!" he yelled, but the alleyway was empty. Just a short walk down to a cement wall. He took a few steps further in, looking for a door or any other way out aside from the way they had just come in, but there was nothing. Did I turn down the wrong alley or something? Suddenly, he felt the tip of a gun pressed up against the back of his head, and he raised his hands in the air to surrender. "All right, I want you to hand over all the money you got, now," a voice said behind him. Sorry, Aifos stuttered. I don't have any." "You think I'm going to believe that? You walk around wearing a tuxedo, and you think I'm going to believe you don't have any money. Hand it over, now." "I really don't." "3. Please, I'm telling the truth." 2. Aifos snapped his eyes shut. 1. A gunshot. "This necklace is magic, and it will protect you, no matter what." A breeze blew past the otherworldly landscape. Rolling fields of pink grass stretched on as far as the eye could see against a backdrop of green skies and wispy clouds. It was a strange place, wherever it was. It felt unnatural at first glance, and yet there were none who could deny the feeling of comfort that came from being here. Something about this place always felt like home. The serenity of it all was cut off as a beast let out a mighty roar. It was a bulbous white mass, covered completely in strange glowing pink eyes. There were several small black tendrils poking out of its lower half, twisting and coiling around each other until they coalesced into 8 spindly legs that looked far too thin to actually hold it up. Then there was the sound of a gunshot, and 4 small metal arrowheads lodged into one side of it, each one connected to a thin black wire that in turn connected to a 4-barreled gun. It was being held by a young woman who looked to be about 18 and was dressed in a black jumpsuit like she had just stepped out of some sort of spy movie. She had a head of short blonde hair with the backmost locks bound up into a bun, while letting the rest of her hair fall to the side. With a confident smirk growing on her face, she pressed the button on the side of the gun and the wire snapped. The arrowheads exploded, destroying half the creature and causing it to deteriorate into an amorphous orange blob. She laughed as she put her hand on her hip and pointed the gun into the air. "So much for our hardest training exercise yet. I could take on 7 of these things by myself." "Slow down, Miriam," another girl's voice called. Miriam glanced towards the other 2 girls running up the hill after her. One of them had long, messy red hair, bright blue eyes, and a stupid-looking smile on her face. The other one had short black hair with a white hairband, brown eyes, and frankly looked rather exhausted. They were both only a couple years younger than her and were wearing frilly white dresses with a big black butterfly etched into the chest. Miriam rolled her eyes. She did every time she saw them here. They're allowed to design an outfit however they want, and they go with that? "Wait for us," the black-haired girl said, leaning on her knees as she caught up, completely out of breath. "It wasn't that long of a run," the red-haired girl said. "Well, both of you are too late," Miriam said, with a confident smirk pointing her gun to the orange blob. "I already took care of it." "Really? That fast?" the red-haired girl said, walking up to the blob. "Emily, be careful," the black-haired girl yelled. "She doesn't have anything to worry about. That thing's good as dead. It's moving," Emily yelled, pointing at the blob as its shape shifted. "What do you mean it's—" Miriam began to say, but she was cut off by a black tendril shooting its way out of the goop. The tendril felt around, attempting to get a good grasp on its surroundings. Emily took a few steps back. "Emily, get away from there," the black-haired girl yelled. "It's okay. I got it," Emily began to say before several more black tendrils shot out as well. "Coming," she yelled, running back over to the other 2. "Cassidy, what do we do?" "We shoot it again," Miriam said, cocking her gun. Another tendril shot out of the mass, followed by another and another. Once it had enough to reform its legs, it pulled itself up, its body still a mass of oozing orange goop. Soon after, dozens of pink eyes popped up on its surface, one by one, before the orange mass hardened to white. It immediately focused its gaze on Miriam, lashing out one lock of its tendrils at her. Miriam took aim, preparing to shoot it out of the way, but wound up taking a hit to the chest, getting tossed down the hill. "Miriam!" Emily yelled, running after her. Hold on, don't leave me up here alone, Cassidy yelled, turning back towards the creature. One of its tendrils lunged towards her, but she threw her hands forwards before it reached her, forming a shimmering silver javelin in a grip as she did, already in mid-throw. The javelin was incredibly ornate, made of a shining silver with an intricately patterned black butterfly sitting just below the spearhead, giving an illusion of the butterfly carrying it forwards as the spear carved through the air. It pierced straight through the appendage, sending the creature reeling back in the other direction. Its pink eyes all focused on her, she took a couple steps back before darting down the hill to join the other two at the bottom where Emily was pulling Miriam to her feet. Okay, do we have an actual plan this time? Cassidy yelled. Yeah, Miriam will shoot it and then, Emily began to say before looking at Miriam. Where's your gun? I dropped it, Miriam said, looking down at her aching arm. Emily looked back at the top of the hill where the creature was inching its way towards them. Cassidy, you stay here with Miriam. I'll go get it, she yelled, running back up the hill. Wait, Emily, she can just... Cassidy began to yell before Miriam grabbed her shoulder. There's a training exercise, right? Let's see what she can do. As Emily ran up the hill, she held out her arm and it began to glow. After only a brief moment, it became covered in a mechanical gauntlet, equipped with a large circular rainbow-colored shield. The creature swung at her with one of its tendrils, and she held out the shield to block it. It hit the shield with a loud boom. Unfortunately, even though the attack was blocked, the recoil was not, and she was sent tumbling back down the hill. Miriam sighed. You're supposed to send out a projection on your shield forward, remember? I know, Emily yelled, scrambling back to her feet and running back into the action. I just wasn't fast enough. Let me try again. This time, putting her shield ahead of her first, she once again ran up the hill. Once again, the beast swung one of its tendrils at her. This time, though, she made sure to stop, dead in her tracks, and close her eyes tight. The shield glowed and then shot out a flash in front of itself, which soon took the shape of a large cyan shield of light, much larger than the shield that spawned it. This time, the tendril hit the projection, leaving Emily completely unharmed. She laughed, turning around back to Miriam and Cassidy. I did it! Emily, look out! Cassidy yelled. Huh? Emily turned back around. She was immediately met with a second attack, hitting her in the face. She fell backwards, tumbling down the hill, leaving the other two at the bottom. She didn't appear too heavily injured, but she was unconscious. Emily! Emily! Cassidy yelled, holding Emily in her arms. Wake up! She'll be fine, Miriam said, stepping forwards. If she wasn't, then she would have pulled us out already. Let me show you how it's done. Miriam dashed up the hill. When the tendril came around to hit her, she let herself fall forward, catching herself before she hit the ground, letting the attack fly clear over her head. The creature quickly followed up with another vertical swipe, but she managed to easily avoid it with a quick roll to the left. After that was out of the way, she pushed herself back to her feet and made a dash to the top. With a smirk, she held her hand up in the air, and the gun appeared in her hand with a flash of light. Suddenly, the creature exploded again as it received another shot from Miriam in the back, the resulting force sending it flying off the side of the hill and landing in the plain below as a wobbling orange blob. Honestly, I don't know why I get paired up with you two amateurs, Miriam said, walking down the hill. She let out a heavy sigh and rested the gun on her shoulder. How many times do you think we gotta kill it? Emily still hasn't woken up, Cassidy said, tears in her eyes. What if it broke her neck? Miriam walked up to them, rolling her eyes. She tossed her gun to the side and placed her ear against Emily's chest. Nope, there's still a heartbeat. Emily said, moving a little bit. What? Emily! Cassidy yelled, pulling Emily into a hug, pushing Miriam off her in the process. Ow! Emily yelled, grabbing her head. Oh, sorry, Cassidy said. I just thought you were... It's okay. I always like getting a hug from you, Emily said happily. Cassidy let out a small laugh. You two, get ready. It's getting up again, Miriam yelled as the blob shifted a little. Soon enough, it was once again sprouting black tendrils and growing huge pink eyes before finally hardening back into its spider-like form. As they all got ready to fight, though, they heard a scream. Looking towards its source, they saw a person falling from the sky. Aifos screamed as he plummeted down towards what was presumably the earth. He only took in his strange surroundings for a brief moment before he realized he was falling straight towards some huge white thing. He crashed into it, landing on top of some huge pink blob that could vaguely be described as an eye. Strangely, though, he wasn't hurt, like he had landed on a gigantic pink pillow. And then it exploded. There wasn't any fire or shrapnel, it was much more like a balloon popping than anything, but he was still sent flying up into the air as the thing behind him dissolved into a formless orange mass. To his relief, he didn't wind up too high in the air and crashed onto the ground with little more than a slight pain in his rear. "Ow," he said, before realizing the grass he had landed on was pink. "What the..." He pulled out a few strands and then looked towards the sky, which was a strange shade of green. He only had time to question it for a split second, though, as he soon found a 4-barreled gun pointed in his face, and a very angry-looking girl standing over him. "Who are you?" she asked. Wait. Please don't shoot. I'm sorry if this is a restricted zone or something," Aifos said in a panic. "I asked you a question." "Oh, right, of course." Aifos stood up. "My name's Aifos, and, you are?" "Can it? Doesn't matter who the hell I am. Tell me what you're doing here." "It was an accident. I'm sorry." "Hey, Miriam?" Emily grabbed Miriam on the shoulder. "I don't think we should point our weapons at people we don't know." "Who asked you?" Miriam yelled, pulling her shoulder away. Miriam's a pretty name," Aifos said in a vain attempt to try and ease the tension. Miriam put her gun barrel right against Aifos' chest, pushing him back a little. "If you try to sweet-talk me again, you'll wind up like that thing." She motioned to the orange blob behind them. Right. Noted." Miriam sighed and grabbed Aifos by the wrists, tossing him over to Emily. "You've got the shield. You take care of him. We'll finish off this thing, and then we'll ask her what to do with him." "Her?" "Mm-hmm," Emily said. "She's talking about our boss." "Our boss, who's obviously going easy on us." Miriam crossed her arms. "This thing just explodes at any provocation, doesn't it?" "When is she going to realize that we aren't babies anymore?" Miriam kicked the goop, and the small piece of it she hit vanished into the air. "Sorry about her," Cassidy said, walking up to him. "Not a lot of people can enter this place, so we're a little suspicious when anyone does. I think if you were a threat, though, our boss would have already stepped in by now. My name's Cassidy, and this is Emily. The girl who pointed the gun at you is..." Cassidy's senses abruptly cut off as her eyes fell upon the jewel around Aifos' neck. That necklace. Aifos looked down at it. What about it? I feel like I've seen it somewhere before." The two stood in silence for a moment, looking into each other's eyes. They were both hit by a strange wave of deja vu. For some reason, Aifos felt like he'd met her before. "Miriam!" Emily interrupted, poking her head between the two. "What?" Cassidy asked, snapped out of her daze. "The girl with the gun. That's her name. Miriam." "Oh, thank you," Aifos said, shaking his head clear. Where are we exactly?" "Oh, we're in the soul of the world," Emily said excitedly. "It's full of magic monsters and stuff. We use it as a training ground." "And it's supposed to be a secret," Miriam yelled. "Don't go telling him about..." The second she let her guard down, a black tendril shot out of the goop and struck her in the back. She tumbled to the ground, but found herself relatively unharmed. She let out an annoyed groan and quickly pulled herself back to her feet. "All right, you want to go?" Miriam grabbed her gun and aimed it at the newly reformed creature. Just like before, it swung one lock of its tendrils at her, which Miriam prepared to dodge. This time, however, the individual tendrils split apart, forming a fan-like shape that was too wide for her to move out of the way. Miriam pointed her gun at it, but before she got the chance to shoot, the tendrils wrapped around her and carelessly tossed her to the side. "Miriam!" Cassidy yelled. "I've got to go help." She ran off towards the fight. "Okay!" Emily happily waved her goodbye. "Why are you so calm?" Aifos yelled. "What even is that thing?" "It's... Emily paused, taking her time to think over the question without any real sense of urgency. "I don't know," she eventually said with a shrug and a smile. "Our boss told us to come beat it up. Miriam says it's rigged, though, and blows up really easily." Cassidy ran towards it, forming a javelin in her hand again. The beast swung one of its tendrils towards her, once again fanning it out like it had done with Miriam. This trick didn't work quite as well with Cassidy, however, as a carefully aimed throw of her javelin cut through the tendrils at the base, severing the fan entirely before it could reach her. The spider swung at her again, and she took off, circling around it until she had reached the far side. It raised its tendrils in the air, but before it could bring down the attack upon her, Cassidy's javelin pulled itself out of the ground where it landed, and tore its way through the creature before landing it back in her hands. The thing let out a loud roar before it exploded again, reduced back to a pile of orange goop. So, you don't normally make things explode like that? Aifos asked uneasily, looking at the scene. Emily put her finger on her chin, legitimately pondering the question. I don't think so. Sheesh, it won't stay down. Cassidy let out a deep breath. Miriam, are you okay? Yeah, I'm fine, Miriam yelled back. Glad I'm not the only one doing anything around here. About time one of you two chipped in. How many times have you blown that thing up? Aifos asked. 4 or 5 times, I think, Emily said. Well, if it keeps getting back up, then maybe there's more to it. What do you mean? Have you tried shooting it when it's like this? Emily gasped. No! Let me try it! Her shield appeared on her arm. Hey Cassidy, watch this! What are you? Cassidy began to say, but Emily cut her off by sprinting towards the blob, her shield glowing bright blue. It disconnected from her gauntlet, and she gripped it in both hands, bringing its face slamming down upon the orange mass. The blob flashed a bunch of different colors before exploding into a rain of flowers. Emily let out a loud laugh, twirling around. They explode into flowers! That's so pretty! Thanks for the tip, Aifos! You? Miriam looked over at the boy, standing there with a stupid look in his eye. Of course he figured it out, she thought, before taking a few angry steps towards him. Then there was a sound. Another roar. Aifos! Emily yelled, running in his direction, forming her shield in her hand again. Aifos turned around to see another one of the creatures right behind him. This necklace is magic. Look out! Emily yelled, throwing her shield towards him. The creature lifted a tendril into the air, but before it came down, a large blue bubble appeared around Emily's shield, encircling Aifos and keeping him safe from the blow. There was little time to celebrate, however, as it raised the tendril up for another strike. The bubble popped, and Emily grabbed Aifos' wrist, trying to pull him away. And it will protect you. The massive tendrils came down right on top of them. Emily gasped, trying to pull up her shield, but she reacted too late. The blow crashed into the ground with a loud thud. Emily! Cassidy yelled, throwing her javelin into the tendril. A few moments later, the creature exploded, hit by a blast from Miriam's gun. But Aifos and Emily were nowhere to be seen. Emily? Cassidy yelled. Emily, where are you? Emily! Miriam, Emily's gone! What do you mean she's gone? Where the hell could she have disappeared to? It's not like there's a lot of cover. I don't know, but she's not here. Emily! No matter what. Ow. Aifos rubbed his head. Where did I wind up this time? He thought. Ugh. I go clean for 2 whole years and then I get warped twice in one day. Talk about embarrassing. He pulled himself to his feet and looked around. Between the blinding heat and dusty roads, he quickly assumed he was in some sort of desert town. In the distance, he could see tall palm trees lining the road, and in between sidewalks were patches of stones and cacti instead of grass and trees. Not far in front of him was a small, artificial hill painted with several tribal-looking designs. Despite all of that, though, the buildings around him looked rather ordinary for a city, though they were a far cry from the skyscrapers of New Eris. He only thought in his new surroundings for a brief moment before turning his thoughts back to the city where he had just been warped out of. That was Sophia he saw, wasn't it? What was she trying to show him? Where did she... Cassidy? Miriam? Where am I? Aifos looked up from his thoughts and turned around. Standing behind him was that girl from the Soul of the World, Emily. Only her white dress from before had disappeared, being replaced with a yellow t-shirt that had a black butterfly emblazoned in the sleeve, and a pair of plain blue jeans. Was she pulled along with me? Aifos thought to himself. That's never happened before. He paused, thinking over what he should do, before starting with a simple, Hey. She gasped. Aifos! You're here too! Do you know what's going on? Actually, yeah, I think so, he said awkwardly. See my necklace? It's magic, and anytime I'm about to die, I get warped away to somewhere safe. Wow, Emily said, poking it. I've never heard of any magic thingies teleporting people away without them starting it up. She looked at him with a big smile. So you can just send us back, right? Well, it's a little more complicated than that. What do you mean? I can't really, control it. It teleports me away from danger, but it always teleports me somewhere random, and I haven't ever gotten it to warp me on its own, let alone choosing where. What do you mean you can't control it? Emily asked, grabbing Aifos' shoulders. If you can't control it, how am I supposed to get home? Cass probably has no idea where I am, and she's probably freaking out right now. Hey, calm down. We just need to get you a plane ticket or something. It's no big deal. A plane ticket? Yeah, we'll just find the nearest airport and go from there. But we can't take an airplane to the soul of the world. Wait, you don't live there though, right? You said you were just training? Yeah, I guess so. So you probably live in a city or town somewhere, right? Uh-huh. Which probably means they have a plane there? Emily nodded. Probably. Aifos paused, but it soon became clear that she wasn't about to say anything else. So, where do you live? I don't know? What do you mean you don't know? I don't know. You don't know the name of your city? No. Your state? No. Your country? No. How do you not know where you live? I've never traveled anywhere. I know my way around town, but not its name. You're kidding, right? No. Aifos let out a sigh. Well, okay then. We just need to... Oh, I've got it. The police station. The police station? Miriam and Cassie are bound to put in a missing person report, right? If not them, then somebody. All we've got to do is ask the police to look for one that matches your description. And then they can tell me where I live? Well, I don't know. Maybe? It wouldn't hurt to try. Aifos walked into the plaza and asked the first person he saw for directions and then led the way forward. So, if you're always warping all over the place, Emily said, then where do you live? Oh, I kinda don't. I just sleep on park benches and stuff, Aifos said. Lived in an orphanage when I was really little, though. An orphanage? Orphanage. You know, where orphans live? What's an orphan? You mean you don't know? Emily shook her head. It's, well, kids without families. No parents or aunts or uncles or anything like that. What happened to your parents? Aifos paused and let out a quiet sigh. I don't know. Whatever happened to them, I was really little. Oh. I didn't know my parents either. Emily looked down on the ground. But I never lived in an orphanage. Orphanage? Yeah, now you got it. I never lived in one of those before. Yui has been taking care of me my whole life. Yui? Uh-huh. Don't you know her? I thought everyone did. I've never heard of her, no. Well, she's super important. She's the one who was training us, and she's, in charge of everything. So, she's your boss. Yeah. And what exactly is she training you for? To be protectors, obviously. Protectors? Protectors of what? Everything. Like, superheroes? Emily paused. Forget I asked. Are Cassie and Miriam orphans too, then? Nuh-uh, just me. I haven't met Miriam's parents, though, and she doesn't really like to talk about them. If your boss is running some sort of magic school, I wonder if she could teach me. He took his necklace in his hand and stared down at the pink jewel. I don't think so, Emily said. I think she chooses people herself. If she hasn't already chosen you, I don't think you can make it in. Oh. Well, hey, maybe you could put in a good word with her when you get back. If I could learn to control these powers... Aifos stopped. Hey, look, I think there it is. He pointed at a rather unsuspecting little building sitting on a street corner. You sure? Emily asked. Considering the big sign that says police station on the side, yeah, pretty sure. Come on. The two walked into the office. It was mostly empty, with the only other person in the room being a woman sitting at a desk, typing into a computer. The two walked over to a counter, and she looked up to greet them. Hello, how may I help you? I like your clothes, Emily said, peering over the desk. The woman was wearing a mostly black police uniform with a belt and badge and all the usual knickknacks, though she also had a small purple shawl draped over her shoulders. Thanks. Do you actually need help, or... Yes, Aifos said. This girl here is lost, but she doesn't remember where she came from. I was wondering if you could check a missing person report or something, see if she pops up so we can get her home. I can see what I can pull up. Do you have a name? My name's Emily, Emily said. Last name? You don't know your own last name? Aifos asked. Well, that makes things a little more difficult. Still, we can just put in a search radius and... Actually, it probably wouldn't be around here. Like, anywhere around here. Could you check, the whole world? You're joking, right? Is this some sort of prank? No, we're serious. It's complicated. We don't even know where we are. The officer sighed. Strix, Ariona. Ariona? That's halfway across the entire country. I thought you just said you don't know where you came from. The officer said with an annoyed look on her face. Look, I don't have time for pranks, so no, it's just I'm from New Eris, but I don't know where she's from. Well, I'll just see if they've got anything then. The officer typed something into her computer before looking up at them. I don't have any missing persons reports for an Emily. Sorry. If you can get me a last name or a more narrow location to search, I can try again. But as for right now, there's not a lot I can do for you. Aifos sighed. Yeah, that makes sense. Sorry for wasting your time. Come on, Emily. What seems to be the trouble? Another deeper voice said as Aifos started to walk away. Aifos stopped and turned around. It was a man with some rough blonde hair and a light beard on his face. He was wearing a long purple cape with a black uniform underneath them, matching that of the other officer. Aifos couldn't quite place what, but something looked off about his eyes. Oh, no trouble, sir. The girl here is just lost, but doesn't seem to have a last name or location to give us. Is that so? He looked at Emily, then at Aifos, and smiled. I've dealt with a few cases like this. Come with me, you two. I'll help you figure out this little puzzle you have here. You will? Thank you, Aifos said. It's my pleasure. Follow me, please, he said, leading them deeper into the building. So, Aifos began, who are you? My name is Relius Kimberly, the man said. I'm chief of police here in Strix. And you are? My name is Aifos, and this is Emily. A pleasure to meet you both. So, you say you've seen cases like ours before? Not too often, but yes, I have. It's always a bit strange, people showing up in our city, not knowing how they got here. You two don't have the slightest clue? Emily put her hand on her chin. Well... No, we don't, Aifos interrupted. I see. Relius opened a door into a plain gray hallway and let the two of them walk first before closing the door behind them. He took the lead again and continued heading further in. So, he continued, I hope you don't mind, Aifos, but that pendant of yours is quite beautiful. Where did you get it? It's a gift. A gift, you say? Interesting. Relius fell silent as though he was rolling something over in his head. Then Aifos noticed the silence wasn't just with their group, but all around them. No other officers seemed to be nearby, and the hallway was completely void of doors, aside from the one they had just entered from. Sir, where are we going? Aifos asked. Relius turned the corner, and there was another door leading to a small office. Just to my office. This way, if you would. He opened the door and held out his arm for them to enter. Aifos eyed the room. Gray walls, a polished wood desk with an expensive-looking computer on it. One wall was lined with bookcases, and there were a couple chairs for them to sit across from the desk. It looked normal enough aside from its isolated location. Still, no one else in the building would know they were here. With a deep breath, he walked in, and Emily followed behind him. They both took a seat, and as soon as they did, the door slammed shut behind them. Why did he shut the door? Emily asked. Doesn't he need to come in too? Aifos stood up from his chair and ran over, trying to twist the doorknob, though it was locked tight. "Hey, Relius!" he yelled. "What's going on?" "It's nothing personal," Relius's voice said over an intercom. "But I can feel the magic coming off both of you. Your hearts will do wonderful for my research. So, my sincerest apologies, but I'm afraid this is goodbye." "Wait! He's not supposed to know about magic!" Emily yelled, shooting up from her chair with enough force to knock her to the ground. "He's a bad guy!" "You think?" Then, the sound of gas being released into the chamber filled the room. Within only a few seconds, both of them started to feel lightheaded. In a few moments more, they began coughing violently. With a flick of his wrist, Aifos' cape appeared on his back, and he tore it off, handing it to Emily. "Cover your... cover your mouth. Don't breathe it in." He took one half of the cape in his own hands, using it to cover his face, while Emily did the same with the other. It seemed to do very little, however, as soon both of them were down on their knees, their consciousness fading away. Soon enough, Emily collapsed to the side, unconscious, the cape falling out of her hand. Aifos reached out to her, but he wasn't very much better than she was. It wasn't long until he fell over as well, and his vision faded. He weakly reached up for his necklace and wrapped his fingers around it. "Sophia, help." Suddenly, a large spike of stone burst into the wall, followed by another, and another. Soon, the floor tore itself open, and a cloaked figure emerged out of a hole in the ground. He moved over to Aifos, just as everything went black. Aifos felt something push up against his face, something soft. It nudged him several times before his eyes flittered awake. Opening his eyes, he saw a small black cat pushing its face up against his. His head was throbbing, but he managed to work up a smile and give the cat a small pet. "Well, hi there, little guy." He pulled himself up to a sitting position and grabbed his head. "Where am I?" "In my house," the cat said. Aifos let out a shriek and tumbled over from the shock. "You just talked." "Yeah, and you just screamed." "You're a cat!" 2 for 2. Your observation skills are impeccable. Congratulations. "Cats don't talk." "Really? The talking cat is the weirdest part of your day. You literally appeared out of thin air and then got kidnapped by a police officer who tried to kill you by locking you in a room full of poison gas. Compared to that, I'd say a talking cat is rather plain." Aifos let out a gasp as the cat's explanation snapped his brain back into focus. Relius was... Where's Emily? Is she okay?" Cat flicked his head, and Aifos followed the gaze. They were in some old wooden building. A dirty rug covered the equally filthy wood floors, and both of which were covered in everything from clothes to discarded books and empty food containers and just about anything else in between. Emily was laying down on a dusty old couch, one of 2 that sat on each side of a crooked coffee table. She still seemed to be unconscious. "Is she okay?" Aifos asked. "I think so. Relius was probably just trying to put you on her so he could take you somewhere else. That's what he usually does." "Usually? Has this happened before?" "Well, duh. What, do you think I just saved you by chance?" "If this has happened more than once, how come nobody's done anything?" "Because Relius is a cop. Not only that, but he's the cop, the big cop. He can keep his tracks clean, and if somebody finds the dirt, then he's the one they report to, and he can just frame some innocent sap." Aifos sighed. "So, you saved us then. What happened?" "Well, I was just minding my own business when I felt a sharp aura spike. Followed it and saw you 2. Figured it was probably you, 'cause you stuck out like a sore thumb. Trailed you back to the police station and, well, this ain't my first rodeo. I knew what to do from there. Pulled you both underground and brought you here." "You felt an aura spike?" "Yup." "What does that..." His sentence was cut off as a door gently opened, and a woman in a dirty black robe stepped into the room. A golden cross dangled off her neck. She seemed to be some sort of priest. "How are they doing, Bop?" "This one woke up. The other's still out cold," the cat said. "Well, it's a good thing you're awake. Here, take this." She walked over to Aifos and handed him a small glass of clear liquid. "It should help clear the poison from your system." She then walked over to Emily. Aifos looked down at the cup and then over to Bop. "Just drink it. She knows what she's talking about." With a deep breath, Aifos drowned the drink in a single gulp and then immediately gagged. "Ugh! Talk about bitter! It's medicine. What do you expect?" A few seconds later, the room was filled with a loud cry of disgust from Emily as the priestess dumped the drink down her throat. "You," she yelled, That was nasty! The priestess stood up. Thank goodness you two are okay. You're doing the Lord's work, Bob, helping people like this. Yeah, Bob said. The priestess gave the three a small nod and left the house. Emily sat up on the couch and rubbed her head. Where are we? I guess this cat here saved us, Aifos said. Got us away from Relius and brought us to his house. A cat? Yeah, a cat, Bob began to say, but then he immediately found himself scooped up into Emily's arms and she held him up to her face. Oh my gosh! It's a talking cat! That is the cutest thing I've ever seen! Please put me down, Bob said with a very bored expression on his face that was only one step away from being annoyed. How are you talking? Are there any other talking cats? Can I meet one of them? Can I take you back home? How are you so energetic after just being poisoned? What's your name? What's it like being a cat? Do you steal fish from the marketplace? Aifos laughed a little bit as he watched Emily assail Bob with questions. He was content to just sit there and let it play out, but then he heard a voice. Johannes. Confused, he looked around. There didn't seem to be anyone nearby, and it certainly didn't come from Bob or Emily. Then he heard it again. Johannes. Almost in a trance, he got up and started following it to its source. Did you choose your fur color? Emily asked. Hey, other kid, can you please get this girl under control? Bob asked, looking back towards Aifos only to see him walking away. Aifos has made his way to a small wooden room with nothing in it besides a small trap door built into the ground. Johannes. Not entirely thinking it through, he reached towards it, but was suddenly snapped back to reality as Bob landed on top of the trap door and hissed. Aifos took a few steps back and grabbed his necklace. What do you think you're doing? Bob yelled. Aifos looked down at his hand and back at Bob and realized he didn't really know. It was almost as though something had taken control of his body. I thought I heard a voice. Emily walked over and poked her head between the two. Is everything okay? Yeah, Aifos said. Sorry, Bob, I don't know what came over me. Bob sat down. Just don't go snooping through people's houses, all right? I think it's best if we get you two out of here anyway. Sir, are you okay? An officer said, helping Relius out of the rubble. The entire back half of the police station had collapsed. A few fire trucks had gathered around the wreckage, though it seemed nobody but Relius was caught in the ruin. I'm fine, Relius said, dusting off his cape and staring at the wreckage. Guess the building wasn't up to code, the officer said with a huff. We should probably inspect the rest of the structure to make sure. Relius blotted out the rest of the officer's words, narrowing his eyes on the wreckage in front of him. This wasn't an accident, he thought to himself. This is clearly the work of WHM. Perhaps I underestimated just how much magic those children had. Still, I doubt they'd simply collapse a roof on top of their heads. Where could they have run off to? Sir, the officer asked. I've got some work to do, Relius said, turning away. I'm sure you can handle the cleanup without me? Yes, sir. With a swish of his cape, Relius turned and walked away. If they spread the word about what happened to them, I could wind up in a spot of trouble. So we'll just have to make sure they don't get the chance.